Hi, welcome to another edition of the Alan Rosenberg Show. It was 30 years ago, July of 1994 to be exact, that the Rolling Stones released Voodoo Lounge, a major release with a huge tour that backed it. And you can see a whole bunch of stuff here, Voodoo Lounge related, we're going to talk about. But Voodoo Lounge was a historic album. And you're like, really? It was. Why was it historic? Well, it was the first album that the Stones released on their new label, Virgin Records. This was the version that came out on Virgin. Say that twice. Here's the Virgin. This is a latter remix of it. It was on Universal, but I prefer the Virgin one. This is the release on Virgin. Came out July of 1994. Why else was it historic? Well, it's the first on Virgin. It was their first album in 5 years after Steel Wheels. It was the first without Bill Wyman on bass. They actually had Darryl Jones play bass on the album. Chuck Leavell also played keyboards on it. Don Was produced it with the Glimmer Twins, Mick and Keith, and there was some butting heads because Don Was really wanted this album to be a classic type of Rolling Stones album. He wanted this thing to sound like, not Exile on Main Street. Some people have said that, but definitely like a classic type of Stones album. Mick really wanted more groove-oriented kind of stuff, funky stuff, and they went with that classic Stones sound. With that said, this is a really, really diverse album. It really is. And we're going to go through it track by track. But Mick definitely took that more percussive kind of experimental rhythmic groove for Bridges to Battle on the following album. Also, this album came after 2 solo records. Keith did Main Offender in 1992. Wandering Spirit from Mick came out in 1993. This came out July of 1994. It's a long album. It was 62 plus minutes long. So it was a double album. If you have it on vinyl, it's a 2 LP set, but it easily fits on 1 CD. Most fans feel that the album's a little long. I feel like it's a little long. But the ironic part is that when you look at the Stones chat boards, nobody seems to be able to agree which songs they would cut. I know which ones I would have cut, and I'll talk about it when I go through it track by track. But yeah, there's a lot to take on this album, and I think overall it works really, really well. So let's go through it. It was successful. It hit number 1 in the UK and hit number 2, peaked number 2 in the US. Unfortunately, would stop from number 1 from the damn Lion King soundtrack, but still pretty good at number 2. 4 singles, none huge hits, especially in the United States. We'll go through them. So the opening track of the album starts off with a little fill from Charlie Watts, and they go into Love is Strong with Mick's awesome harmonica. I love the song Love is Strong. Here is the CD single of it. And all the singles had unreleased B-sides. This one had that bluesy track called Storm, which is a cool B-side, but didn't need to be on the album. Love is Strong is a great track, and it's a great Rolling Stones track because it really sounds like the Rolling Stones. It's got that groove. It's got that feel. If you know Keith, his guitar licks are very similar to Wicked As It Seems, so which is kind of interesting as well. But the song really works, and it had a great video. Maybe the best Stones video ever. The Giants walking through Manhattan, black and white. It's just awesome. So a great track. I would never have chosen it as a single at all, and I certainly wouldn't have chosen it as the debut single. And I'm not saying that because it's stiff, because boy did it stiff. It peaked at number 91 in the United States. And considering that Mixed Emotions, the first single from Steel Wheels, peaked at number 5, that was a shocker. But it's a really uncommercial track, as great as it is. So there you go. I think in the UK, Love is Strong did better. Well, it certainly did better because it hit number 91. In the UK, I think it went top 20 like 14, 15 or something like that. All right, that's Love is Strong. Let's go to the second track, which starts with Charlie Watts again with an opening fill. That goes into You Got Me Rockin', which also was the second single on the album. Here is the single, Love This Artwork. That would have been the artwork if it was my choice for the whole album. Great B-side on this, by the way, called Jump On Top of Me. Oh my God, I would have put that on the album. That one didn't make the album. It should have. And they played Jump On Top of Me just once, live. Really cool. But You Got Me Rockin's the second single. It is really the only Latter-day Stones track that is pretty much played at every tour and almost every concert. Mick has done his best, and I guess Keith, to try to make it a Stones perennial classic. Maybe it'll get there one day. It's actually a really good track. I don't think it's a classic, but it works great live. Hey, hey, You Got Me Rockin'. Third track starts off with Charlie Watts again. 3 rockers open the album, and all of them open with Charlie Watts, which is really cool. That Sparks Will Fly. If you know from Voodoo Stew and Voodoo Brew, that is very much a Keith track. There's versions with him singing it. It's a good rocker. You know, definitely a good Stones rocker. Worked well live. I remember the video with the spiky tongue during it. Lyrics a little bit edgy there, Mick, but I'm not offended by it. Good track. That goes into Keith's ballad, The Worst. One of the best Keith Richards solo Stones tracks that he sings. I love The Worst. He plays it occasionally live, and it's always great. It's got great instrumentation. Keith sings it great. It's actually a version he did with Sheryl Crow, which is pretty cool, too. The Worst is a great, classic Keith Richards Rolling Stones track. That goes into New Faces, which is harpsichord and Mick, and great instrumentation as well. I love New Faces. It's one of those really deep Stone tracks that I just think it's really cool, and a great example of why the Stones are the greatest band of all time. They just do all these different styles, and it still comes out sounding like the Stones, and you really hear that with New Faces. A great track. That goes into Moon Is Up, and for me, there's your really first experimental track that if you were going to make it a shorter album, Moon Is Up would have been cut. But Jagger felt that CDs were expensive. I remember reading this. And he decided to make this an extended album because CDs were expensive and the added length. You could put more stuff on there that would not normally make the cut. And I totally get that, and I think it's a cool move. And Moon Is Up, to me, is a perfect example of that. You know, I know that Charlie plays like garbage cans, and it's this immense, weird, cool kind of track. It's different, but not something that would stand out as a great, great track. And they played that live. I got it on a bootleg. Played it live like once. That goes into Out of Tears, which was the third single from the album right here. And that also had not one but 2 B-sides that were not on the album. I'm Gonna Drive and So Young. So Young goes back to the Some Girls days. And that, to me, is an incredible ballad. I'm a sucker for Rolling Stones ballads. I think they're an amazing ballad band, believe it or not. And Out of Tears is great. I think it's an extraordinarily great ballad. Hats off to Ronnie Wood, does a great pedal steel solo on there that really lifts the song. It's a beautiful track that they played live on the tour, and I loved it. And that goes into a hard rockin' track next called I Go Wild, which was the 4th single from the album right there. And if you got this CD single by then, they put on a live version of the song as well. Because one of the great things about the Voodoo Lounge tour is the Stones played a lot of new music from Voodoo Lounge. And that album is made for live broadcast. They're really live sounding songs. And I Go Wild, I thought, just kicked butt live. And I think it's a really, really good track. Excellent track, actually. It was the 4th single. Like the rest of the singles in the United States, had virtually no success. I think the most successful single in the U.S. was Out of Tears, and I don't even think it went top 50. I think it was like 60-something. In the U.K., had a little bit of success. Love Is Strong, I think, hit 14. But that's about it. Really, I Go Wild, though, did pretty good in the UK. It went top 40, I think, for whatever that's worth. So that's I Go Wild. That goes into the next track, Brand New Car. There's another one that for me I would have cut out. They played it once or twice live. Yeah, to me it's more like that experimental kind of R&B groove. It's not terrible, it's just not a great song. And the idea of Mick, using a woman's body with a car, smell the fur and all of that kind of stuff, it's just okay. Not a highlight of the album, not terrible either. But I would have cut it for a shorter length. Next goes Sweethearts Together, which the first time you hear it, you're like, well, that's kind of weird. It's like Mick and Keith singing together. It's kind of romantic. It's kind of nice. Sweethearts Together. Really good instrumentation. At one point, they're like, sha-la-la, sha-la-la. It's kind of tasty, and it's a grower. It's actually a pretty good song. No classic, and maybe some people would cut that one out, but it's pretty interesting. Next goes Suck on the Jugular. That's a good example probably of the direction Mick wanted to go for a lot of this album. Very R&B-like, very funky, very funky. It sounds like the Stones because Charlie Watts' drums is unmistakable on it, but Darryl Jones on bass really gets a chance to shine on the album in that song, Suck on the Jugular. It's okay. I feel like it's out of sorts on this album. It really doesn't fit this album. It's more solo Jagger-like, but it does sound like the Stones, but it just doesn't really fit the album. That one could have got cut probably too. Then you go on to Blinded by Rainbows, which is a virtually unknown song unless you're a big fan of Voodoo Lounge. And that with Out of Tears is probably my two favorite songs on the album. Again, I love Stones ballads that are great. And Blinded by Rainbows, I think, is just extraordinarily great. I wished they would have played it live on the tour. They didn't. I just think it's an amazing song. I love the music. Even the lyrics are good. Blinded by Rain. I love it. But some people seem to hate it, so go figure. That goes into the bluesy groove of Baby Break It Down. Good bass work on that. That's a really good track. Very Stones-like. Really rhythmic, really grooving. Baby Break It Down. I like it. It's a really good song. Great? No, but really solid. That then goes into Through and Through, Keith's second song on the album, and that is a very experimental Keith song. It just starts off with Keith on the electric, picking out the notes, and then singing it, and you're like, this is just odd. And then about the 2-minute mark, you get Charlie coming in with this massive percussion, kind of like that Moon Is Up, boom, 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 boom. And it's still mostly just Keith. And then the 4-minute mark, the whole band kicks in with these massive drums that he had to have recorded in like a room somewhere. And the song really picks up. And it's kind of a deep cult cut on the album that's different and cool. And would have been unknown except the Sopranos picked it up on one of their episodes, which was really cool. So Through and Through is a interesting track and a really weird way to end the album in some versions. Because if you have the cassette, here's the original cassette on Virgin, it ends with Through and Through, which I think is just a strange way to end the album. But if you had the CD and I guess the vinyl, it ends with another track called Mean Disposition, which I kind of like. It's like a 4-minute, just a bop-in kind of a good groove, and it's just like a palate cleanser to end the album after Through and Through. It's not a great song, but it's a good song. So what you find, in my opinion, of Voodoo Lounge is a really, really diverse Rolling Stones album, which I like. Some people kind of claim it was going to be a latter-day Exile. Doesn't sound anything like Exile, but the idea that Exile is so sprawling and has so many different textures to it, Voodoo Lounge is kind of like that, even though it starts off with those 3 rockers that are all started by Charlie Watts. Never heard that before, where Charlie opens 3 songs in a row, which is kind of interesting. So overall, I just think it's a really, really strong latter-day Stones album. And I used to say, out of those latter-day Stones albums, which was Steel Wheels, Voodoo Lounge, Bridges to Babylon, and A Bigger Bang, Voodoo Lounge by far was my favorite of those 4. Now you're going to add Hackney Diamonds in there, and now it's a battle for the best of the two, between Hackney Diamonds and Voodoo Lounge. Tough battle. Hackney Diamonds is a tighter album, so if you took the best 45 minutes of Voodoo Lounge, man, that's a hell of an album. The tour itself was an amazing tour. Continued from the gigantic staging of Steel Wheels. Voodoo Lounge tour was immense. Had this big snake that would shoot fire down. I saw the show only once. They played 4 shows at Giant Stadium in New Jersey, and I saw the opening night, August 12th. Let's see if I can show this to you from Fragile Concert Books. Now, I have tens of thousands of clippings in other books, but this is from my concert book, and there is when I saw the Stones. Counting Crows were the opening band. Stones still belting their rock and roll magic. And then Sonic Overhaul for the Stones at Giant Stadium. They played 4 sold out shows, and I saw the opening night. And the tickets were $50. There's the tickets, if you could see right there. $50 a ticket, which at that time was a lot of money. So, well worth it, though. Really interesting time for the Stones, and if you like bootlegs, Voodoo Lounge is prime for bootlegging. Amongst the best is these two. This is Voodoo Brew, which is a 4 CD box set on Vigatone with a beautiful booklet in there, and it's got 4 CDs of how they made Voodoo Lounge, including an alternate version of Voodoo Lounge, which is really cool. I dig it. And then that, I guess, was successful enough that they did another one called Voodoo Stew, which is this giant 4 CD box as well from Vigatone. More of how they made the album. You know, it's pretty fascinating, including some great songs that didn't make the album, like Honest Man and some other stuff as well. These are amazing bootlegs, and these are great examples of why when I talk about the Stones official box sets, like those up there, and I'm like, they're more sizzled and steak. You don't get a lot of music on them, really. This is an example. All right, the bootleg stuff is amazing. What's out there? Tons of live bootleg CDs that I have from great shows. When they went to the following year, 1995, and they went to Europe, they did those amazing small shows. Like this is a bootleg from the Paradiso called Foot Tappers and Wheel Shunters gig, a legendary bootleg. And here's another one, another small show from the Brixton Academy. I love those. But then, of course, the Stones did an amazing box, this Totally Stripped, where you get a lot of those shows, and I've done a video just on this box. You get a lot of those shows on DVD. And those are extraordinary shows, you know, because the Stones were playing really deep cuts on those small shows. Just great. There's a bootleg box of all the shows, or some of the shows from when they played Amsterdam on the Voodoo Lounge tour. Great set list. They were playing great stuff. And then, of course, instead of just releasing another live record, the Stones did put out Stripped, a really cool collection, you know, of acoustic stuff and some of the deeper live stuff. Really good bootleg is this one called Stripped Companion, which has stuff that didn't make Stripped, but maybe should have. Some great stuff there. And then officially they did put out this thing, Voodoo Lounge Uncut, which is that legendary pay-per-view show, and it's an excellent show. It's the one with Sheryl Crow, I believe. Robert Cray, Sheryl Crow, Bo Diddley. Yeah, this is a great show. The Stones, it was a great tour because, you know, I like to say the Stones were really an active band then. They were putting out great albums and playing them live, which is what you want. I got some bootleg DVDs. And last, this is really cool. That would have been like the artwork for me for Voodoo Lounge. This is actually an official promo from Virgin. This is called Rolling Stones Voodoo Lounge Sampler. And they put Blinded by Rainbows on there, which means I'm not the only one who thinks that's an extraordinary song. But I guess the Stones didn't because they never played it. Anyway, there is my wrap-up on Voodoo Lounge, which was, again, my favorite of the latter-day Stones albums. Hackney Diamonds maybe now beating it out or tying it. But it is a really strong latter-day album. And it's 62 minutes long. In all fairness, if you cut out 15 minutes of it, a couple of those songs, you got 45 minutes of really great prime Rolling Stones. Oh, and by the way, here's that video. I just got this from a viewer. This is from Giant Stadium, a concert on VHS from that tour. There's a lot of Voodoo Lounge stuff out there, and it's really worth seeing. Really good period for the band. Anyway, let me know what you think of the Stones Voodoo Lounge. And as you can see, this is the actual tour shirt that I got at that show, and still in perfect shape. So there you have it. As always, thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy. If you're new, hit subscribe. This will also be put into the Rolling Stones playlist that I have, and a ton of Rolling Stones videos in there that you might enjoy. So definitely worthwhile checking out. As always, thanks again, and I'll see you next time on the Alan Rosenberg Show.